And a good day, everyone. Welcome into the It's Official podcast. First Bet and Express Bet represented here. He's Jeff Siegel. I'm Jeremy Plonk. We've got 5 hot topics in horse racing each and every week, and we emphasize hot. It is July, and things are heating up. Saratoga set to open in just 2 days' time on Thursday. And, of course, we had the announcement today of Santa Anita's stake schedule for the September meet. So a lot of news and doings in horse racing. We're a week away from Del Mar. But we look back on this program, Jeff, and we had a big racing week around the world last week, and some points of call that we don't always hit on this show, right? Prairie Meadows, Horseshoe Indianapolis, Sandown Racecourse in England. We're going to go wide and far on this one.
Well, we try to cover the races and talk about the races that we can identify with, or which ones impact North American racing. And we're looking at some European racing, primarily because of the implications for the Breeders' Cup. And anytime you have a Euro horse and they start talking about bringing them over to Del Mar in November for the Breeders' Cup, it's fair game for us to talk about.
Yeah.
So we'll do that extensively with City of Troy. And then we'll speculate on some other things that might happen. And because every time you run a race, it impacts something down the road. Either they're going here or they're going somewhere else. And we've got a lot of opportunities for these trainers to make important decisions, because there are a lot of options for the horses that ran last week, and I'd be curious to see where they end up down the road.
Geographically, we've talked about how far we'll go on this show, but just in units of measure, we're going to start our first topic off with the horse who's got the most distance to talk about in all of racing. His name is Next. He's the star of the Turf Marathon division, and he was dominant once again in the Brooklyn over the 4th of July holiday at the Belmont at Aqueduct meet. Let's go back and take a look at his win in the Brooklyn.
The lead. Krupe continues to build momentum from the back end of the field. Mass Parade and Drake's Passage still there. Is between these four. Next now kicks away and does it so easily. Next is trying to sprint away from the rest of the field. Drake's Passage is alone in second. Krupe continues to run on, but inside the final furlong, look at Next do his thing. Inside the final 16th now, it's the Brooklyn, and all you can say is Next. Next wins it, then.
He was amazing in that race because he came home so fast. The splits were incredible. He looks like a turf miler the way he's reaching out and just, getting over the ground in the stretch. And this is at the end of a dirt marathon race. You don't see him like this, Jeff. He's a 6-year-old gelding. And where do we go? Let's talk about him. Let's put him in some context here. Let's talk Next.
Well, first of all, he was a turf miler earlier this year. Someone has told him that you're not running on turf anymore and you're running a mile and 3/8 or farther.
Right.
It doesn't matter to Next. He finishes like he's sprinting home.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an exciting horse even at age 6. But the good news is he's a gelding, so there'll be no rush off the stud for him, even though he's by a very hot and very popular young stallion, Not This Time, which I love the name Next because it's not this time.
Yeah.
But now he's getting to a point now where the connections are trying to do the quote unquote right thing with him, which is to keep him in his comfort zone.
Right.
And because he's a gelding, you want him to last forever. You want him to be a poor man's John Henry, which is to say that you're running in grade 1 races even at age 9. But that is the issue here, is because he doesn't step out of that soft spot of those marathons, which he can win without even taking a deep breath. There are those out there who are racing fans like me who have no financial interest in managing other people's horses. That maybe he should, step out and take on the big boys. And that, I think, and I want your opinion on this, his impressive performances, his speed ratings, his speed figures, I think you're into 109 in that race. Do you think he could fit with the very best in his division, the older division, which to me looks good, but anybody to really be afraid of?
No, there's not. And that's what makes it so tempting with him. And the other thing is he's in absolute peak form. How much better do you think he's going to get? He's running incredible races, big on numbers. Doesn't matter which track. He just takes the venue with him. How much better do you think he's going to get? Now, you could say, I want this to be a very good horse. He could be a very good turf marathoner at age 8 or 9, right? But for now, his brilliance. He may not be brilliant at 8 or 9, but he's brilliant enough now to beat really good horses at a mile and an eighth or a mile and a quarter. And that's where the money in the divisions are. It's in the classic divisions. So look, I don't think he's ever going to be better than he is in 2024. If he's as good at age 8 or 8, 9, he will be a John Henry-esque John's Call kind of horse, right? Maybe more John's Call than John Henry, because he was great, a really good horse all the way into that 9-10-year-old season, John's Call, but not an all-time great like a John Henry. Next is really good, and he's got the right situation because there's not much out there in the handicap division. We've talked about it on the show in the past. White Abarrio, last year's classic winner, basically was kind of a two-hit wonder and hasn't come back to that form this year. National Treasure's solid, but last year they thought he was a miler. Do you want him at a mile and a quarter in the classic? You don't have to worry about distance when it comes to next. And I think the opportunities for him next are really interesting because he can get that chance to see where he belongs. September 1st is the Jockey Club Gold Cup at Saratoga. That's a mile and a quarter. It's a cutback, but it takes you out of the marathon division to the classic division. I don't see anybody in the Jockey Club Gold Cup who's going to be brilliant and drag him along too fast, because those horses would be in the Whitney. So, the Whitney will be earlier in the meet. The Jockey Club Gold Cup has almost become a plotter's race now on the NYRA circuit. At the end of the Saratoga meet, it's the horses who weren't fast enough to go in the Whitney. I think that sets up beautifully for him. The other possibility is you go out to Del Mar, you go to the mile and a quarter, and you try the Pacific Classic. And it'll tell you there, because the Breeders' Cup Classic, of course, this year, the whole Breeders' Cup event is at Del Mar. Do you come back to the Breeders' Cup for another Thoroughbred Aftercare Alliance marathon race? The kind of race where he'll be 1-5 in? Maybe if you don't run well enough in the Pacific Classic against the brilliant classic type horses. But if you do win the Pacific Classic, now you're running for, $6 million plus in the Breeders' Cup Classic as one of the favorites, if not the favorite. So I think he's got two really interesting options. I think the Pacific Classic or the Jockey Club Gold Cup, they're only a day apart. Pacific Classic, August 31st, Jockey Club Gold Cup, September 1st. Those are the races I would want to see him in next, because there's nobody in that division to scare you away. And there's no particular speed blazing kind of horse that, there's no Life is Good in these kind of races, that where maybe you get into a race with a horse who was like Life is Good and they rip you apart and it's not good for you moving forward. But he's going to be in races in the Pacific Classic or in the Jockey Club Gold Cup that are going to go 28, 48, 112. And if they do that, this horse just steams.
Well, that's what makes this horse so good, because he's so versatile. He can go to the front. He can sit second or third and stay out of trouble. He can run on dirt. He can run on an off track. He can run on grass. But his purse earning potential at this stage of his career is so much more than it used to be. I mean, this horse has earned $1.1 million in his entire career, and he's not some ex-claimer. Now, he was claimed. I'll say that for him. But it's not like he started out that way. He won 2 out of his first 3 starts, ran in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile as a 2-year-old, won a stakes as a 3-year-old on grass going a mile. He's a beautiful athlete, a beautiful mover. I could see why he was so sound. You watch him run. Does he even lift his feet off the ground? He just breezes,
That's the part that looks different than other horses. Like sometimes when we've watched horses over the years, some just like look different, like a Zenyatta, right? When she walked by, you knew that was Zenyatta, a little different. Some horses just move different than others. And this horse has a really nice way of moving that looks different than a lot of the others. And that's part of why he can run as fast as he can, as long as he can. Trainer Doug Cowens has done an amazing job with him. They've managed him incredibly well. The connections. And I'm not saying you throw him to the wolves. I don't say you throw him to the Whitney, right? I don't want him in a mile and an eighth race with a bunch of really brilliant horses. I don't think that's good for him moving forward. But a mile and a quarter that's not going to be particularly fast. I mean, who's the world beater in California for the Pacific Classic? Maybe you would, maybe National Treasure. You'd say, well, maybe that's a little too sharp for him. But National Treasure at a mile and a quarter is a question mark. So,
well, that's the thing is, you talk about throwing them to the wolves at a mile and an eighth, because there are a lot of decent mile and an eighth horses out there, but as you go farther, they drop by the wayside. And next his ability to run forever, but accelerate and come home in 23 and change, going a mile and 3/8 in New York on the dirt. There aren't many horses that can do that, none. So stretch him out. I mean, all he would have to do is back up an eighth of a mile from his last race. I think he'd handle that to go a mile and a quarter. I would think that right now, if he were to get one more race into him, and he clearly doesn't need to run to be fit, he keeps himself fit, and he obviously can run more fresh, but one more race for whatever you want to run him in whatever situation you want to run him in, would all be needed. And then you run him in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, he would make more money in that race if he were to win, which I believe he probably would, than he would running in these second and third rate marathon races if he even ran till it's 10. Now, I realize that money isn't always the necessary factor to follow. I mean, maybe you just want to enjoy your horse and watch him run for lesser purses. If that's the case, that's their horse, they can do that. But I mean, financially, it makes absolutely no sense to keep around and doing that. You've got to step out and go for the money. And he's capable of doing it.
And I'll give you this dials back a little bit and shows our age, but I'll give you a good comp on this horse. 1991 Black Tie Affair. Really good regional horse from the Midwest like that, who got super good during that season. Ended up becoming a Breeders' Cup Classic winner. I think there's a lot of Black Tie Affair about him, and I think he's just really good right now, and I'm interested to see it. And when we talk about maybe going out for the Pacific Classic, remember, we talked Santa Anita Stakes schedule just announced today. They're going to have the new $1 million California Crown coming up on September the 28th. That's a 1.1 miles. It's the former Awesome Again Stakes, but with a juiced up purse. That could take some of the speed away from the Pacific Classic. There might be people that say, let's not go to the 1.25 miles in the Pacific Classic and just train up to that race a month later at Santa Anita. So I think the Pacific Classic could be there and ripe for a horse like this. And again, if you go out there, you're gonna check a lot of boxes. We know he handles Del Mar. Yeah. We know he can go the 1.25 miles here over the track with the Classic. And if he doesn't quite run up the snuff in that spot, you can come back in the thoroughbred after Carolines at Del Mar, later in the year, that big marathon race that's run on Breeders' Cup weekend. So a lot of options for next.
I'll tell you what, fun horse. If I were Del Mar, I'd be hustling the heck out of him like yesterday. Get him out here, give him a guarantee if you want, because not only would he be a very good horse to have in your race, he's a very popular horse. I mean, the fact that he's gray and he wins off by himself, he's kind of a rags to riches horse in a way because he's an exclaimer. I mean, people would watch that race that normally wouldn't even bother. So it's not that he comes as a surprise to you and I. We've been singing his praises for 6 months, but it's now, I think, the public's catching up to where we were. And I think he is the really, for an older horse, he's not Cigar yet, but I'll tell you this: he's won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7 out of his last 8 races, and I think the minimum margin of victory was like 9 lengths or something. He just doesn't win; he puts on a show.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing where he goes next. Next up for us will be topic 2. Look, they were dropping F-bombs in England about this horse, like Frankel we're talking about with the F-bombs. His name is City of Troy. Was he Aidan O'Brien's best 3-year-old ever? Is he better than Frankel? Is he better than Giants Causeway? Is he better than the greats of what we've seen on the turf in England in recent years? Well, he won the Epsom Derby a couple weeks ago. He came back and took on older horses last week in a really watered down, less than par edition of the Coral Eclipse Stakes at Sandown. City of Troy got to the winner's circle, but he didn't get any more folks on his bandwagon.
Troy comes through to put his head in front with inside a furlong and a half to go, but Ghostwriter tries to go with him. Al Riffer unleashed now towards the near side with a late sustained bid. City of Troy has the lead inside the final furlong of the Coral Eclipse. Al Riffer down the outside, Ghostwriter to the inside rail. City of Troy drifting to the rail. He has a lead of a length, and it is City of Troy who has won the Coral Eclipse, to Al Riffer in second, and in third came Ghostwriter.
Impressive performance. This is, like I said on Twitter, this is like winning the Kentucky Derby and then the Stephen Foster in the same Churchill Downs meet. You beat the best 3-year-olds in your crop, and then you beat the top handicap horses or the top handicap race in the older division shortly thereafter in his next start. But this was not a great addition. He didn't win going away. The connections were even a little disappointed. John Magner talking about it afterwards of, we thought he would be a little more impressive than he was. What do we make, Jeff? I mean, he's not Frankel based on what we saw there, but what do we do in terms of our public perception of City of Troy and his prospects as a Breeders' Cup Classic or turf contender?
Well, his connections set the bar pretty high for this colt after he became a champion as a 2-year-old. And even after his win in the Epsom Derby. We're talking about the best Derby winner O'Brien's ever had. And he now has to make excuses. That is, the trainer, when the horse doesn't win like he's supposed to. Aiden is protecting the investment, let's put it that way. So after this race is over, he kind of apologized for the race, saying it was his fault. One thing about Aiden, he usually tries to point the finger at himself, even if it's not his fault. The ground was soft. You could certainly make a case that City of Troy struggled with it, but he was getting a considerable amount of weight in the race as a 3-year-old to beat a horse who was up the track in his last start in the Manhattan at Belmont. So, there are a certain amount of expectations that weren't met. In fact, some of the headlines after the race in the British press were, at least we know he can win ugly. That was one of them. More guts than grace. That was another one.
Right.
So maybe he's not the next Frankel. And I quite frankly don't think he is, because I thought Frankel was the best European horse I had seen in decades. Never lost a race and never came close to losing, really. But it does open up some question marks as to what version of City of Troy we're going to see and what conditions does he need to be at his best. Now, we don't know whether he's going to run on dirt in the Breeders' Cup Classic, but after the race, his connections were adamant that is the goal. And the question is how best to get him there. He's in a race later this month, the King George, which he is one of 19 that remain in the nomination list that are still eligible to run. Auguste Rodin is in there as well, stablemate, older stablemate. There are other races, the Dudman International, the Champion Stakes at the Curragh, could be final preps. The trainer even spoke about something that was really weird, and that is making up a race at Southwell. I think that's how it's pronounced. I think it's something a little bit different, but that's how it's spelled.
Southwell. You just dropped the W out the.
Okay, Southwell. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, point is that they can virtually rent the track, I guess, make up their own race.
Right.
It's a left-handed Del Mar-ish type of track, all weather, of course, but it's left-handed and pretty tight, and they might use that just to get him prepared to go at Del Mar. So I hope that he wins his next race, and I hope that he comes to Del Mar to run in the Classic. And I hope for some reason or somehow they can talk the connections of Next to come out. Would you like to pay a freight to come out and watch the Del Mar at the Classic with Next facing City of Troy?
And then bring Forever Young from Japan. And now we've got ourselves something like, in a year when the U.S. handicap division is kind of soul searching and trying to find somebody, the 3-year-olds all took turns and passed the baton in the preps and through the Triple Crown races. Yeah, I mean, we could be talking about an exciting Breeders' Cup Classic with the marathoner Next, the Japanese horse Forever Young, and of course this British runner, City of Troy. Got a 120 Racing Post rating, which I'm not, a big numbers guy, certainly not with international numbers, but it is significant that is the second lowest figure for any horse that have won the Eclipse since they started doing the figures. So he didn't dazzle anybody. You can look at it and say workmanlike, but he only did what he had to do, that sort of thing. It didn't sound like he only did what he had to do discussion amongst the connections afterwards. I think they were generally looking for reasons why he didn't run to his ability. And maybe the ground, which is always that's always the first call in Europe when a horse doesn't run well. It's the ground, and American trainers aren't averse to using that either in defeat. But he's going to get firm ground. If they talk about, he didn't like giving the ground, he'll get firm ground at Del Mar if he came over for the turf. But again, with Auguste Rodin for the same connections, we got to see if they all get here healthy. But, defending champion of Breeders' Cup turf, he's probably going to occupy that slot for O'Brien. So I think you would look at City of Troy and buy Justified. This is the key, right? Buy Justified, pull more folks. Like you said, protecting the investment. They will want to run this horse in the dirt, on the dirt, in the Classic, City of Troy, if he's up to snuff in his next start and healthy enough come November to come to Del Mar for the big one in the Breeders.
I get a vision in my head about the Rocky movie, the second one, when he wants to rematch with Rocky, and his handler comes up to him and says, "Boss, he's no good for us." I can someone say, "This horse Next, boss, he's no good for us. Stay away." And right. I just, because I would be afraid of him. I really would. I mean, that's how good I think Next is,
Let's be honest, though. Horse racing is afraid of horses like Next because he's a gelding. He's the other side of the tracks. He's a former claimer. You've got to justify that you spent seven figures on. You want to make a stallion out of him. You're selling the sizzle, not the steak, as Cot Campbell of Dogwood used to say. And, Next is the kind of horse you don't want to lose to, and you don't want to be the head of the division. I mean, this is kind of why, for decades, no gelding has won the Kentucky Derby. Well, you didn't geld horses who could potentially run in the Kentucky Derby, because it was about the next step and the breeding of it. Breeders' Cup, of course, they don't want a horse like Next to become the star of American racing. There are different factions who have different desires in this game, and certainly breeders and higher end people in racing wouldn't want that. But as fans, as gamblers, as horse players, bring it on, and that's who I support. And that's kind of my my calling card in the industry, where I started and where I still feel the most allegiance to. So as players like you, me, fans, bring on Next to the Breeders' Cup. Let's get him to one of the big races. Maybe he takes on City of Troy and others in the Classic. To our third topic this week, we said we were going to move you all around the country and the world in the different divisions. Well, let's talk filly and mare sprint division in Southern California. We don't get to Los Alamitos very often on this program, but the Great Lady M Stakes was this past weekend. It's been a race that's had some top-notch filly and mare sprint division winners over recent years, and it had another one this past weekend, as Sweet Azteca. She just keeps on blazing.
Daddy's Ruby from Sweet Azteca by a neck, 2.5 lengths in front from Yuki, and then comes Get the Money on the outside, followed by Olivia Twist, 3/16 left to go, and it's Sweet Azteca on the outside taking the lead from Daddy's Ruby. Sweet Azteca has burst away, and she has the Great Lady M safely in her keeping. It's a polished performance from a high-quality filly, Sweet Azteca by 5 lengths. Daddy's Ruby second, Super Shine coming home strongly for a most creditable third, and Olivia
You don't spread eagle sprint fields like that very often. Now, Los Alamitos does have an exaggerated long stretch run there, the paperclip diagram of the racetrack, as you kind of see the oval, and it's a long run down the lane, and sometimes wind margins can be exaggerated there. But she's blowing people out no matter which venue she's at in Southern California. She's the best of the West in the sprint ranks to me, Jeff. They're going to have to catch her come Breeders' Cup time.
7/8 looks like a perfect distance for her. I understand there's a possibility that she might go to Saratoga and run Next. Ballerina, I think it is. And she is a filly who won 2 races back by 12. Last time out, she outran Adair Manor, which you just don't do anymore, but she did. And the Beholder Mile going a mile. But her connections, I believe, and they're correct in saying so. Michael McCarthy, she's better around up to a mile or around one turn. She's only lost once in her life. She's only run 5 times, 4 starts, career top buyer number in that race, broke the track record, did it easily. And she will probably have just one, I would think maybe one more race prior to the Breeders' Cup Sprint. But out here in California, there's no one who can even remotely touch her. That was a Grade 1 winner she beat in that last race. And then obviously there are good fillies back east too, but none have raced against Sweet Azteca, and none, to my way of thinking, have beaten the filly and did it convincingly that she did when she beat a horse as good as Adair Manor. So I think she's exciting. I think right now, if I had to make a favorite for the Breeders' Cup filly and mare sprint, she would be strong. Not only because of the fast, but she's out here in California. Again, she's got the home track advantage. And I even though she's never run at Del Mar, she'll train there. And I think that she's exciting for a filly who, again, lightly raced 4-year-old filly. She's really, really, really good.
I'd say just stay on the West Coast because the Breeders' Cup's there. Why come east to Saratoga and then come back home? The easy path. I mean, the big win for them, you would think, would be the Breeders' Cup. So I would try to, get to the Breeders' Cup the easiest way possible. But look, there's a lure to Saratoga. There's no question about that. And, if you got a horse who can go compete on that kind of stage, it's like taking swings at Yankee Stadium. I mean, it's where if you've got a filly or a horse who's capable of running and winning at Saratoga, I can see the attraction for sure. I don't know if it's the best case scenario for them going forward to the Breeders' Cup then, but everybody's got different different goals.
She's already a Grade 1 winner, so she doesn't have to worry about that.
Yep.
She's going to be running at 6.5 in Del Mar if she runs in the Rancho Bernardo, which will be a walkover, which is a good thing because it won't take anything out of her. You don't want to burn her out and then have her run her guts out. Even if you win, you might lose even when winning.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe just keep her out here and tick her over and go for the big prize. That's all she'll really need to do in terms of championship honors. It's nice to win an Eclipse Award, and she'll win the Breeders' Cup Filly Mare Sprint. She'll win that. Mm-hmm. I would keep her here, but it's again, Saratoga is an allure. I mean, you get lured to Saratoga, and I know I've been there and run horses there. So we'll see what happens. But again, these are the decisions these trainers have to make. We got that out of the way. Now what? And the now what's so fun to talk about, as we often do here on a Tuesday show.
Goodnight Olive is passed the baton to someone else in the division, and it might be time for Sweet Azteca to take it over in the Filly and Mare Sprint ranks. Let's go to our fourth topic this week, and we get back to the 3-year-olds. And we mentioned a little bit when we were talking about the Breeders' Cup Classic division, we had 3 different winners of the Triple Crown races. The Grade 1 races all sort of traded hands throughout the 3-year-old ranks. So now we're to the second half of the season, firmly in the second half of the season with the 3-year-old races, and the reinforcements have arrived. We had the Iowa Derby, the Indiana Derby last week. We're going to see both of those races and see if any of these horses might have something to say the second half of the sophomore season. First up, the Indiana Derby and the Brad Cox trained Dragoon Guard.
Informed Patriots staying close to Dragoon Guard at the quarter pole. 2 lengths clear then from Stronghold, who now tips to the 3-path. And EJ Won the Cup is sweeping 4 wide. And then toward the inside, Real Men Violin, Woodcourt, and finally Kitty Hawk. They've turned for home after 3 quarters in 1 minute 10.77 seconds with Laurent Giroux. Dragoon Guard, the gray, leads the way, has 3 lengths to hold on Stronghold, who's charging hard on the outside, but they're near home. It's Dragoon Guard. Dragoon Guard has won the Indiana Derby from Stronghold.
Just the 4th career start now, 3 straight wins for Dragoon Guard. No question about the pedigree on this one by Arrogate out of Philimby. Really good Juddmonte mare on the dam side there. A lot to like about Dragoon Guard. He didn't visually just jump off the screen in that victory, Jeff, but he's now won 3 in a row with some daylight to spare in each of those.
Got beat a neck in his first start behind Out of the Conqueror. Nothing wrong with that. Got beat a neck sprinting. He's not really a sprinter. Then he comes back and he stretches out. Actually, he didn't really stretch out. He ran 7/8. Keelan won that race going away. Won a first level allowance at Churchill going a 1-turn mile. This was his first start around 2 turns.
Right.
And being by Arrogate, you would think that would be no problem for him to stretch out to go a mile on a 16th 2-turning. It wasn't. I thought he won very nicely. It was a nice stepping stone. It was the best field he beat. He beat the San Diego Derby winner on the square.
Right.
He wasn't asked to beat the very, very best. Now, you've got Brad Cox trying to think, okay, do I go to a big race? And I personally think he'll train him up to the Pennsylvania Derby. I think that's what he'll miss. The Haskell and the Travers, and he's not quite ready for that. He needs one more springboard. Mm-hmm. And the Pennsylvania Derby makes a lot of sense to me. So I think that's where we'll find out just how good he is. Again, he's gotten faster on numbers in every race he's ever run. He hasn't made any quantum leaps, but he's steadily improving, which is what you want. And as a son of Arrogate, his best days almost certainly are ahead of him. Why not just take each step at a time, and eventually maybe at the end of the year, next year as a 4-year-old, he'll be a monster. But he's a good colt. He's got tactical speed. He can go to the front. I think he'll stalk if he has to. And I like him. He's not there yet, but I like him.
Right. He's got the potential second half of the year for a Cox horse who can get, decent at this point. He had Warrant a couple years ago, ended up being a decent handicap division horse. I'm not saying he's Breeders' Cup Classic material to this point, but if he were to run off the screen in the Pennsylvania Derby, a race like that, now all of a sudden you're talking about a horse like that. Dragoon Guard, again, with these 3 wins in the 4 career starts, he's got a little measuring stick now because Stronghold's probably in that 10 to 12 range of the best 3-year-olds in America, right? Absolutely. I mean, he won the Santa Anita Derby. He was top 10 in the Kentucky Derby. I think he finished, what, 7th, 8th, something like that on Derby Day. Stronghold won the race at Sunland, the Sunland Derby. So he's in that top 10, 12 ranking. And this horse handled him fairly easily, I thought, Dragoon Guard. I didn't think he looked visually awesome. He doesn't remind me of the kind of horse who's just going to go win the Pennsylvania Derby and 147 and change and run off by 12. But he is moving the right direction, and we're looking for reinforcements in this division, like we talked about. He beat a lot of horses in there who we were talking about along the trail. You know, EJ won the Cup, Real Men Violin. These were horses that were kind of in those secondary preps and got to the Arkansas Derby kind of level and didn't advance as Triple Crown kind of horses. He's ahead of those. So that puts him just below the cusp of the horses who ran really well in the Triple Crown. Maybe he's one of the top 7, 8 maybe that you're looking at right now.
He's got the potential to be that. Yeah. And again, as a son of Arrogate, you might be tempted to wait a little longer, thinking he's going to get there eventually. Eventually isn't quite there yet. But let's take the path of least resistance. And then when it finally comes to a time that he needs to run against those kind of horses, he'll be a little bit more experienced, a little stronger, a little fitter, a little older, a little better. And then we'll see.
$1 million California Crown in September wouldn't be a bad spot either. We talk about that race at 1 mile and an eighth, the former Awesome Again Stakes in terms of the distance. You get to the West Coast and then you see what you got. Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile after that, maybe Go Classic. You can take your, you could take your pulse at that point and see where you belong. Also last week was the Iowa Derby. They ran that at Prairie Meadows. Bobby Newman with the call. Let's pick it up at the top of the lane.
Henro biding his time. He's on the fence, just looking for room as they approach the top of the stretch. And Mugatu swings into action as well. They turn home. Here comes Just a Touch to engage Northern Flame on the front end. Just a Touch, Northern Flame. Henro now out for the drive and trying to close on the top two. Just a Touch has taken the lead. Henro running at him on the outside. Here's Henro with Rafael Bejarano up to get a nose in front. Henro wins the Iowa Derby. A nose to Just a Touch.
Typically, you don't close at Prairie Meadows. It's a very speed-favoring track. We did see Red Route 1 come from off the pace and also win the Cornhusker on that card. But to run down Just a Touch, Brad Cox's horse, pretty impressive for Henro, who had, 6 sprints coming into this? He had never been around 2 turns. He successfully stretched out in the Iowa Derby, and he's moving forward.
Not only that, but in his Derby, which was at Prairie Meadows, he actually earned a buyer's speed figure for whatever it's worth of 96, which is 4 points better than Dragoon Guard's buyer number. And Henro, as you pointed out, he's lightly raced. This was actually his 7th career start, 3 wins and now a second. Every buyer number he's had in his last 5 races has produced a forward move. This was his first start around 2 turns. By collected should be a miler, if nothing else, and out of him by Street Cry. Very good mover, good athlete, nice, easy way of traveling, good tactical speed. Again, first time around 2 turns, very well ridden by Bejarano, who put him just where he needed to be, right behind the leaders, saving ground, didn't ask him for much. And the winner on his best day, Just a Touch. Maybe he's not a grade 1 horse, but he's a competitive horse. In fact, his race in the Bluegrass, he probably ran pretty close to that race in here and still couldn't hold on. So Henro is in the same boat, I think, in a way that the Cox horse is, and Dragoon Guard, in the sense that he's not ready really to go after the big boys in the division. But he's the kind of horse, if you spot him right, there's got to be, we saw the graphic earlier, there's got to be some other 3-year-old races. There it is. How about the St. Louis Derby? That looks like a race he could win. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking, $250,000+ for almost all these races, except the Shared Belief at Del Mar, which is in the hundreds, like the $125,000 range. There, you might say, guys, you talk about these 3-year-olds way too much on this show. Well, look at this. This is what's just happening in the next 2 months, and this is where the money is. I mean, this is where the money is. These races are anywhere from $125,000 to $1 million in purses as we go between July, August, and into September. So yeah, there are places to run these kind of horses, like the West Virginia Derby for a lot of money. The Ellis Park Derby is about $250,000 now. That's a nice purse there. Super Derby got a purse infusion this year. It had been down in purse money in recent years, but that's back up well over $200,000. Pennsylvania Derby is going to go for $1 million. Oklahoma Derby, I believe, is $400,000 this year. There's some chances to run these horses. horses. Brad Cox likes to run horses in a lot of these different races because he has a lot of good 3-year-olds over the years, but certainly Pennsylvania Derby, Oklahoma Derby, you would expect to see Brad Cox involved in there. And we just saw his 2 horses, Dragoon Guard and Just a Touch. Maybe they fit better in these kind of races. And we also see horses come out of these races on the kind of lower half. I mean, obviously Travers and Haskell horses are Breeders' Cup Classic types in a lot of years when they're good, but these other races have done a good job over the years of sending and throwing horses towards the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. So we could be looking at some Breeders' Cup horses coming out of these secondary races like the Oklahoma Derby, St. Louis Derby, Ellis Park. There's a lot of money to be made for these 3-year-olds still to come. And also the other thing that's cool about this list is these are marquee races for these regional racetracks, right? I mean, if you work at Mountaineer, you play Mountaineer year round, it's blue collar racing, right? And less than blue collar on a lot of nights. And you get the West Virginia Derby, that's what you hang your hat on. Same at Remington with the Oklahoma Derby Day, Ellis Derby card. These are marquee events for these regional racetracks. So that's why we talk about them too. It puts these racetracks in the spotlight more than just their general overnight racing programs, which attract a lot of people from a gambling standpoint, but from an attention standpoint, a lot of people will say, well, why does Track X run a race for $400,000? Because it's marketing money, right? Yeah. It gets name recognition. It gets bigger horses, horsemen there. It gets us talking about it. And therefore, you know about these racetracks a lot of times because of the marketing race that they're offering those nice purses for. A lot of good 3-year-old races to come. The reinforcements are starting to arrive, as Jeff aptly titled this headline: Dragoon Guard, Henro, 2 horses to watch in here. Henro, I wouldn't expect to be a horse that they're going to look to go super far with out of the Iowa Derby. I mean, they sprinted him 6 times. He's probably collected out of a Street Cry mare, but he might be like a Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile kind of horse on his best. And there's nothing wrong with that. They could be developing towards those kind of races. Now, we want to find some real stars of the future, not just these stakes horses. We go to the maiden ranks a lot of times here to end the program, and we will again with our Stars of Tomorrow segment, always wrapping up topic number 5 on the program. We found one. We didn't have to dig necessarily to, points of the earth that we traveled to find this one. New York City, Chad Brown, and a maiden winner named Headline Numbers. But keep an eye on this gal.
And assumes command and reaches the top of the stretch. Tirapati, Bewildered. They're all in behind horses. Silvology's trying to challenge Patty Brown Eyes. But that move on the far turn, Headline Numbers is now striding away. Headline Numbers is opening up this margin. Here's Patty Brown Eyes to the far outside, trying to challenge and might take second. Tirapati's battling on, but no doubt inside the final 16th. Headline Numbers, an easy victor in today's 4th. Headline Numbers wins it. It's going to be a tight photo there. Patty Brown Eyes to the outside of Tirapati. Also running on late. That was Greatest Gift in a photo with Bewildered in 1 minute 36.51 seconds.
Good looking mile there for Headline Numbers. Jeff, what do you make of her?
Well, she's by Gunrunner, she's by Gunrunner. I'm sorry, looking at the wrong number. Gunrunner out of a Curlin mare. So all of a sudden you're thinking that was a 1-turn mile. It was her debut. She could probably, come back in a similar race, maybe a now one as a 2 at Saratoga, or maybe there's a restricted stake she could run in. The mare herself wasn't much at all, but her full sister was a filly you may have remembered. Curlin's Approval was her name. She won the Princess Rooney and placed in a bunch of graded stakes. Not a lot of family in here. I mean, really, other than her, actually. But this is, again, you get a Gunrunner out of that kind of mare, and whose sister was great. Sometimes it skips a generation. And I think Headline Numbers looks to me of the kind of 3-year-old filly that will really develop quickly in the fall. The longer, the better. She's got all her conditions if she needs them. Obviously, in top barn, Chad Brown. And I just think that the way she won that first start, going a mile by that margin, and if it had been farther, that the margin would have been much more greater than just the 12 lengths. I wouldn't be wanting to run against her, talking about tough competition. So Headline Numbers, I'll follow her at Saratoga. Again, interesting to see if they'll take the soft way out and just come back in a now one as a 2, or they might say, let's just get it while we can, and let's put her in a restricted stakes and see if we can win that, get that out of the way, and then the pressure's off.
Let's see where she goes next. It's Headline Numbers, Chad Brown. Look, we went all around the world this week and some places that we don't normally go, Los Alamitos, Prairie Meadows, Sandown. We had to do something cliched. Chad Brown at Aqueduct to close things up. Pretty standard operating procedure, but she does not look like just a standard kind of filly. Headline numbers looks like a pretty good one. 3-year-old filly late to the party. These kind you always have to worry about keeping them sound and developing off a win like this when you don't debut until July of your 3-year-old season. There are reasons for it. So let's hopefully she can, knock on wood, stay healthy, and we'll follow the path of headline numbers. Let's review the topics this week on It's Official. We started off talking about the next question for next, the marathon runner who dominated the Brooklyn. We were talking about races like the Jockey Club Gold Cup or Pacific Classic. We want to see him, how he matches up in a subpar handicap division this year in the classic ranks. The tough crowd in Britain was not impressed by the win by City of Troy, heavily favored in the Coral Eclipse. We'll see how he bounces out of that race and if it's still on to the Breeders' Cup Classic on dirt here in the U.S. The rocket ship from California, her name is Sweet Azteca. She laid another blowout win on him in the Sweet Lady M Stakes. She looks like the favorite right now in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint division. The reinforcements arrived via Iowa and Indiana. The Iowa Derby winner Henro, the Indiana Derby winner Dragoon Guard. Horses that are adding more depth to an already confusing 3-year-old picture in 2024. And our star of tomorrow, we just talked about headline numbers for Chad Brown winning on the 4th of July at Belmont at the Big A. That's a wrap for the Belmont at the Big A season. They've concluded racing there, and we're heading next to Saratoga. Fabled Saratoga opens up its racing on Thursday, so it's a big week in horse racing, of course. Opening day at Saratoga is kind of like the second start of the season. We feel like the day after Christmas at Santa Anita, around New Year's at Gulfstream Park, that kind of gets the winter season going, but it's officially summer when Saratoga kicks off its card. Forecast for thunderstorms and rain, so you know it's Saratoga. We will see how that plays out. Jeff, I know you're going to be handicapping Saratoga and Del Mar in depth throughout the course of the next several weeks. So give the fans a little sense of what you've got on your agenda.
Opening day, Saratoga on Thursday, as you mentioned. I'll have prime plays at Saratoga, same for Del Mar. So we are looking forward to some great racing. I mean, Thursday, you got the Schuylerville for 2-year-old fillies. Looks like a terrific opening day program. Includes a couple of very impressive first out winners that we'll see. And it's also important for the breeders because Vicky Dahl, who won her first start at Churchill very impressively from the first crop of a coma. And that's important if you're selling or trying to buy a Vacoma next month at Keeneland. Then you've got another filly who was very impressive, Complexion, from the first crop of Complexity, a very good sprinter. She won her debut at Aqueduct last month, did that by more than 6 lengths. You've got some, and I'm looking at, you got a Cairo Prince filly named Sherbini who was impressive first time out. So you've got a lot of future stars running in this opening day stakes, and the same for the Colts the following day. So I'm really looking forward to Saratoga. I'm bracing myself for some terrible weather because we always seem to get that at Saratoga. That's the one thing that you go to Del Mar and you look 50 yards over the far turn and you see the beach, and it doesn't rain at the beach, does it? So anyway, but no, looking forward to some good racing. And again, we'll be giving out our best plays every day at both tracks, and hopefully we'll make some money.
All right, be sure to check out the blog section at expressbet.com and at news.first.com for Jeff's daily analysis for those 2 big meets. We'll also have Scott Shapiro handicapping for First Bet and Express Bet during the NYRA summer season at Saratoga, so be sure to check that out as well. Eddie Olczyk giving his picks. We'll have race of the week analysis on my end throughout the course of the summer as well. Jeff and I return on Friday for our next podcast. It'll be the First Call podcast where we handicap 8 stakes races from around the country. Will be a heavy Saratoga flavor. The Diana on Saturday, grade 1, where Chad Brown's got more than half the field, I believe, but we'll figure out which one of the Chad Browns we like best in the Diana or someone else.
Well, if you figure it out, let me know. Because I can't figure that division out, but
we'll try to figure it out by Friday, so be sure to check out that. That'll drop around noon, 1 o'clock Eastern on Friday. So Jeff and I record that podcast. It'll be at about noon, 1 o'clock Eastern on Friday. Be sure to check that out on all the same channels. If you're listening to our audio channels, we appreciate that. If you're on our video channels, YouTube, X, any of those. Be sure to like, share this out, comment in the comment section. That helps grow the audience for our podcast. We have 2 of them every week. It's official on Tuesdays. First call each and every Friday. On behalf of Jeff Siegel, I'm Jeremy Plonk. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you Friday.